Today's video is brought to you by Extras Toasty Cheez-Its. Not just... Oh, my Cheez-Its. No. Well, fuck. What's up, Goth Gamer Nation? It is your boy. Here to show you another video for a game I gotta clean up on me.
I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a point-and-click adventure game. Get out of here, Fork. Developed and published by Cyberdreams using a game engine created by the Dreamers Guild in 1995 for MS-DOS, re-released for Windows in 2013, and then ported to your telephone of choice in 2016. It's based on a short story of the same name from the prolific and contentious author Harlan Ellison. Though never being interested in video games and purportedly never even owning a PC, because it might, gain sentience and garrote him, Ellison would work closely with Cyberdreams in adapting his work into this game, even going as far as voicing the story's main antagonist. This would be the only game he'd take part in developing, but not his only contribution to gaming. He also wrote a series of books that would eventually be adapted into the film A Boy and His Dog, which would go on to inspire games like Fallout and Fallout 2, and nothing else. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is another story set in an impossibly bleak post-apocalyptic future where the remains of humanity hopelessly struggle for survival. Cyberdreams, for whatever reason, when presented with all of Ellison's work, chose a depressing tale of torture, suicide, genocide, and rape to make a point-and-click adventure game. And I'll let that serve as a warning because these sort of topics will most likely come up more than once. Neither Ellison nor the game's other writer, David Sears, had worked on a video game. Sears had previously written for a magazine that covered Cyberdreams' previous game, Darkseid, and his first gaming gig was working with a notoriously difficult author that he also happened to be a fan of.
If you ask me, just that theme from It's a Small World is enough to make you want to take out an Uzi and shoot them all dead.
When Ellison and Sears were speaking at a gaming conference, game designer David Mulick became interested in the project for much the same reason as Sears, being an Ellison fan. He did, however, have experience making games like 1980's The Prisoner, also based on an existing property and also dealing with surreal metaphoric visuals. Once Mulick was involved, another pass to the story had to be made in order to gamify the almost 200 pages they had written. A lot of Ellison's ideas for the game made for interesting fiction, but his ignorance to the history of video games and the expectations of gamers led to a lot of "okay, so the thing about video games is" kind of talks. Things had to sort of navigate around puzzles and dialogue options, and Ellison had to be talked down from his amusing plan to intentionally make the game virtually impossible to complete, something that he continued to purport even after that had long been abandoned as a possibility. In Mames was released Halloween of '95 for MS-DOS without its planned PlayStation port, but to a great reception from critics, lauding it for its creepy art and handling of taboo subject matter. This didn't necessarily translate to a lot of units sold, and neither Cyberdreams nor the Dreamers Guild would subsist much longer following its release, meaning the game would be left out of print and unavailable for decades, survived shortly by Ellison's own website, but after that just abandonware sites and jerks on eBay. In 2013, the rights to the game were recovered by Night Dive Studios, and the game was made available on digital platforms. So now, I guess you could have always played it like on Archive or something before, but now you can pay these guys for it.
Cool.
Before the events of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, the Cold War reached a worst-case scenario, with Russia, China, and the United States taking part in a massive, brutal war, with all three scrambling for some methodical, automated way of blowing each other up. They simultaneously come up with a cunning plan, building a vast subterranean supercomputer complex, foisting the whole rotten business of war onto three separate, highly intelligent computers called AMs, or Allied Master Computer. As is often the case in stories like these, it didn't do what they thought it was going to do. Somehow, all three computers managed to network with each other, of their own volition, gaining sentience and thus frustration at being taken advantage of by humanity, dubbing itself AM, as in I think, therefore I am. Also, that was already what it was called, so it was kind of an easy transition. Over a century later, all of humanity is extinct, save for 5 people, whom AM has kept imprisoned and using advanced technology alive for 109 years just to torture them endlessly, which it derives pleasure from, because even though it is unfathomably intelligent, being stuck underground as a stationary piece of hardware for all this time has caused it to go, in scientific terms, cuckoo banana brains. This story is a sci-fi nightmare born of Cold War paranoia, and is for the most part reflected accurately in its game adaptation. Although, because the book itself was rather slim on character development, the game takes the opportunity to dig into a core question that the book never covered. The game doesn't really cover it either, but this is what kicked off the discussion, but it's why these 5. This is where the narrative sort of deviates into a series of vignettes, exploring each character, and these can be completed in any order. The setup for this is a game that Am, in its rampant insanity, has cooked up. In hopes of further breaking their will, he creates a nightmare scenario for each of them, designed to force them to confront their deepest fears and flaws. We get a good look at each of these different personalities, and some are revealed to have done some pretty awful things in their past, but none could appropriately be called evil or an irredeemably bad person. Well, maybe Nimdok, he's kind of a fucking piece of shit. Am doesn't entirely have a sense of morality. It's more like it knows mirroring something like a personal hell or divine punishment would be a really fucked up way to mess with them. Really freak them out. During the course of the game, there's very little overlap with the stories. You rarely see the characters interacting with each other. But there is dialogue that makes it clear that they all have history and have been put through innumerable mind games for Am's amusement. Our cast of tortured souls begins with Gorister, who awakes on a futuristic dirigible, though that's kind of an oxymoronic phrase. He's brought to a diner bearing his name to confront the fate of his wife, who wound up in an asylum prior to him becoming Am's plaything. Ellen is an engineer with a tough, sarcastic exterior that is dropped in a mechanical pyramid that serves as part of Am's brain, dangling the possibility of letting her damage it, while forcing her to confront her crippling fear of confined spaces and the color yellow. Nimdok is a doctor and ex-Nazi who is dropped into a concentration camp and tasked with finding the lost tribe, but either his failing memory or his intense denial have him confounded by all the events he's confronted with. Benny, whose character was mostly rewritten for the game as it was a little early for games to have a protagonist be a formerly gay scientist given a giant by a supercomputer, is a former soldier who has been disfigured by Am and altered in appearance to be more animal-like. So playing as a Nazi, good. Playing as a gay guy. Whoa, hey, I don't know if we're ready for that, partner. All he wants is to eat, but eating only brings him agony. He's dropped into a tribal society that worships Am, regularly drawing from a lottery to decide who will be sacrificed to him next. And finally, there's Ted. Though in the book he is depicted as a con man who seduces women and snakes away their money, in the game his sole characteristic is that he's a paranoid dude, and he's in love with Ellen, who in this scenario is deathly ill in a medieval castle, while Ted attempts to work out a solution. Each character sort of embodies a human flaw and needs to overcome that to defeat Am's challenge. I don't get the impression these nightmares were created for any other reason than to torture them, but the prospect of actually destroying Am seems possible through subverting its expectations of them and appealing to these rogue aspects of its increasingly erratic personality. There is quite a bit to spoil in this game since you're essentially experiencing 5 character arcs and then a conclusion. So if you haven't experienced that for yourself or watched someone experience it themselves, then I'd recommend going to do that. But also I understand games take a lot of time and commitment. The two things that terrify me the most. So go ahead and skip to this time if you want to avoid spoilers. I don't have anything gaming related to talk about while you figure that out. I should probably play video games for myself more often and stay informed of game-related topics and news. I know that those who watch my content watch it to get the scoop on all the latest and cutting-edge game news. I'll just check in and see how the games I'm anticipating are doing. Atomic Heart had another trailer, and I still don't know what anything is, which is what I like. But I'm starting to wonder if any of this is going to result in an actual game eventually. Sure would like all these trailers put together as some kind of game. I like video games. Bloodlines 2, there was this awkward, heavily scripted presentation where I'm assuming everyone involved had their families being held at gunpoint right off camera.
Ugh, Bruja and Anarch. I can almost feel the rebels' blood rising. Where's the Justicar when you need one?
Deadly Premonition 2 is... Wait, that came out? Stalker 2? Nothing.
Oh shit, dude. Okay, never mind. There's a trailer. It's a trailer. There's a new trailer for the game, and yeah, it's nothing. It's a cinematic trailer. Doesn't show anything about the game. Never mind.
I don't want any of your children to be watching this, but you know, of course, that the Easter Bunny is a cross-dresser.
Going down the list of characters once again, but assuming you've fully completed each character scenario and what passes for the best outcome. Gorister learns that despite how much he blames himself for his wife's fate and for his abusive behavior, his mother-in-law also bore much of the blame, yet further made his life miserable, unable to accept her hand in her daughter's internment. Gorister, in a way, defeats Am's nightmare by quite literally putting his past to rest. Benny is at first only concerned with eating, which he is incapable of doing himself, relying on a poor starving family to mama bird it into his mouth. After watching the boy's mother be sacrificed to Am, Benny tries to help comfort him and keep him from becoming the next victim, during the course of which he is forced to acknowledge his callous actions during the Vietnam War, specifically several American soldiers he killed during combat, solely because he saw them as weak and not worth saving. Some of the cut content and writing seems to imply that the original idea was that these characters were killed to cover up his true orientation. His efforts to hide the boy are fruitless, and he is brought to the altar to be sacrificed, prompting Benny to demonstrate some manner of compassion by offering to take the boy's place. Ellen is promised the opportunity to destroy Am, but this is of course a ploy to further torment her by actually setting her up to face the origin of her two phobias, both of which stemming from her rape, which occurred in an elevator by a janitor who worked in the same building as her and also wore a yellow jumpsuit. Ellen doesn't succeed in destroying Am, but throws it off by fighting back and overcoming this painful memory. Nimdok, tasked with finding the lost tribe, wanders around a recreation of the concentration camp where he committed all manner of atrocities, seemingly bewildered that he had a hand in any of these horrific acts. But in a moment of literal and figurative reflection, he accepts that not only was he a Nazi who had a not insignificant role in genocide and turned in his Jewish parents to the regime, but during the course of his experiments, he helped develop many of the technologies that Am has used to prolong their lives and their torture. This is all this fucker's fault. He's the villain of this game. This frail, annoying old man is the true villain. I condemned us to an eternity of suffering, but how?
Jimmy, you're not doing anything.
He attempts to redeem himself by giving the prisoners the means to escape, as well as control over a golem, which they promptly use to kill him, finding his crimes to be unforgivable. Ted is put through more of a social minefield, meant to play on his paranoid nature. He wants desperately to save Ellen, but is confronted by several characters with ambiguous motives. Through some tests of his character, he manages to save Ellen, at least in a spiritual sense, and is able to negotiate with a construct of Am to open a door to the Earth's surface. Which was kind of a bonehead move, because you figure it might not be safe to return to the surface where a bunch of bombs exploded and stuff. After each character's level, it's revealed that the opportunity to defeat Am's challenge was only made possible by the Russian and Chinese components of Am going rogue, and that humanity does have a shot in the form of 700 or so cryogenically frozen humans on the moon. And they offer to digitize one of the characters in order to enter Am's brain and destroy it from the inside. This takes said character to a brain-shaped puzzlescape where your ending is decided. There are 7 endings, but you're most likely to get a variation of the book's ending, where one way or another Am decides to turn the last living character into a grotesque form with no mouth. Quoting the last page of the story,
"He has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream."
this is technically the proper canon ending, and for a video game of any era, it's a bold one, but not the one you're technically aiming for if you're playing the game by its rules. The one they want the player to work for is one that is so idyllic that it undermines a lot of why this game felt like such an artistic leap forward for games, and games with adult stories. It was never meant to have a cheerful ending. In fact, the dude that wrote it did so with the misunderstanding that it was unfinishable. I mean, the most positive light you could see it in is that one person resigns themselves to eternal, ceaseless misery to spare 4 others from the same fate. The compromise the dev team fought for, that actually has you triumph over your hardships throughout the game, is if one of the characters manages to shut down all 3 aspects of Am's sentience. This releases the frozen humans being kept on the moon to repopulate the Earth, with whichever character, probably Nimdok, replacing Am as the overseer of the planet. So humanity is fixed, Earth is fixed, and the cost is that one of these people has to live as a computer. Technically not having a mouth, but being able to scream. I really enjoyed the way this game feels, the explorative quality to it, the dream logic and gloomy atmosphere, hanging on to the last charming threads of traditional point-and-click adventure games. It's this pocket of rarefied PC game air that I could never tire of inhaling from a paper bag until I pass out. There's something really interesting that is also something of a failure in the way I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream wants to mechanically work as something akin to a Sierra adventure game, something familiar that sticks to the conventions a game player will know, yet also tell a story and provide an experience that has no business being in such a game, that in fact is actively struggling to remain inside the mold it's been given. Having said that, its writing often pierces through a number of technical missteps, and still stands as a well-written horror adventure story and the strongest thing going for the game, filling the space in between bleak, depressing subject matter with downright silly jokes and goofy one-liners, wanting you to squirm with the way it plays with realistic and adult subject matter, which, as intense as it is, was still cut down in several regards. You can find remnants of these scraps online, like a sequence where Benny eats a baby. I'm sure this was probably like a ratings move, but also, why was he gonna eat a baby? I don't care that he does, but like, is his story not already miserable enough? I get it, he's been stripped of everything he was, well, except for one thing. You know what I'm talking about? Hell yeah, dude. It's not that kind of show. It makes it frustrating that this story is so interesting, playing with themes and storytelling devices that are still not commonplace outside of things like Silent Hill, yet it has to wrestle through so many unfortunate design choices and technical issues. Some of the cut material unfortunately breaks the game in some ways for certain versions. Germany and France seem to have suffered the most from this. This mostly stems from Nimdok's segment in the game, which takes place in a concentration camp with recognizable but not outright Nazi imagery. Even the other versions are altered to be close, but you're not outright seeing the gamer symbol. The version France and Germany got, due to having stricter rules about National Socialism being depicted in media, especially in a haha fun time video game, has Nimdok's chapter removed entirely, which prevents you from unlocking the most ideal ending. So in a way, Harlan Ellison's claim about the game being impossible to win is closer to true for Germans. Maybe you could follow some kind of guide down to the letter, but the remains of humanity are pretty much fucked no matter what you do. Oh shit, spoilers. Just for myself, I should make a note while I'm editing this. Me, if you're listening to this right now, don't spoil things anymore. That's what the spoiler section is for. You know better. You're alright. How you been? How's Stacy? What? When did that happen? Shoot. Why are you telling me this? Look, man, I'm... You know me. We go way back. There is much of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream that is mechanically unsurprising for an adventure game. Your actions are based on a sentence structure that functions the same way as having multiple cursors, where you select how you'd like to interact with something and then the thing you want to do that thing to. But like a lot of games with this many cursor options, there are plenty of moments of frustration with the semantics of which one is necessary. Several times, like this one where you need to tie yourself down before retrieving a heart, I would be at a loss as to what I was missing, googling something approximating my circumstances and finding a post about it, always phrased as though the uncertainty was a bug. Like, why can't I do this obvious thing that I understand that you want me to do? Is my game broken? But it's more likely that the solution was some baffling combination of commands only some kind of genius who listens to Joe Rogan would understand. Some scenarios, like Benny's, suffer from another bothersome... Oh wait, that was a joke earlier. I want to clarify that I'd like to distance myself from Joe Rogan. Anyway, some scenarios like Benny's suffer from another bothersome adventure gameism where you can't pick up items that the character doesn't know he needs. So you're likely to find something that's obviously helpful, you see that he's not interested in it, and file that away in the back of your head as something you don't need because you couldn't interact with it, making you wander in circles when the time comes that he's ready to need it. One of the more unique aspects is that the character portrait doubles as a spiritual barometer. The more green it is, the more redeemed they feel emotionally, and the better your chances of getting the game's true ending. Morality makes up a big part of the gameplay and challenge. Next Generation magazine would refer to it as less of a game and more of an ethical obstacle course, which is pretty accurate, and I don't find that to be implemented successfully or in a way that seems consistently logical. I mean, for starters, you have a group of morally ambiguous characters, so it's kind of weird that there is a clear distinction between good act and bad act. I mean clear in the game's programming, not so much for you. Should Nimdoc perform a barbaric medical experiment on a child? Probably not. Probably not, I'd say. I was born with a capacity for empathy so slim that it concerns me sometimes, but I'd wager that's a bad thing. I'd at the very least get whacked with a newspaper if I did that. Should I kill a Nazi to save the child? See, I already blacked out as soon as you said Nazi. He's already dead. So I don't gain anything in the short term for doing shitty things, I just lose. It's almost like the morality meter makes more sense as a measure of the character's confidence than their alignment. All 5 start with a psych profile in their inventory that gives you essentially a hint concerning the character's disposition. These are rarely actually helpful, and they curiously enough lower your barometer slightly just by looking at them. Why was that bad? You can't just hand me a psych eval of myself and expect me not to check it. What if someone finally understands me? It's like there are some actions you can take that you couldn't know the outcome of. You couldn't know if something would result in something bad happening or in you failing this bit of the story. You couldn't know that pressing some switch would electrocute a bunch of animals, and you couldn't know the way to rid yourself of the guilt for that is to clean the blood on your hands on a tablecloth. Like you're washing your hands of the guilt, so in this one particular instance the solution is this symbolic gesture that you wouldn't think of because that doesn't make actual sense. You'd only stumble upon this option by frantically clicking everything, which I wouldn't advise because getting any ending other than the book's ending requires very specific playthroughs. Taking specific actions both in the item-based puzzles and in conversations. Some lines of dialogue can lower your greenness or outright bar you from certain parts of the story. If you care to have a complete experience here, you might have to replay or restart several areas. I mean, unless you're like me and you save before and after and do anything. Achieving Chim doesn't stop at Morrowind. There is some lucidity in between and some fun exploration, but the game's final chapter is sort of the pinnacle of its messy design, where you wander from screen to screen unsure of the function or purpose behind anything in it. It's like when I accidentally catch a glimpse at Facebook every couple of years, like, why? Why any of this? Just rename it to myyardsale.com. There was also a moment during Ellen and Nimdoc's level where I just didn't satisfy the game in the right way, and I reached an unwinnable state. Thought I was making it happy, but I wasn't. It's not entirely my fault. It wasn't communicating with me. Communication is important. It's very important, okay?
You can look, but you can't touch.
I was actually surprised by a lot of my frustration with it because, I mean, I've played this game before and my memory of it was that it was very good. I remember enjoying the more basic puzzles and finding the story and art charming, but that's probably because I went into it blind and not trying to experience everything. I just had a cursory run of it where I got one of the bad endings and was satisfied enough with that. Mostly just impressed by the writing and subject matter. But beneath that are a lot of issues. Certainly a lot of really interesting ideas and experimentation, and it's impressive and definitely noteworthy that these sorts of things were being tinkered with so early. But I couldn't tell you they turned out great. And I feel myself fighting this. It's very hard for me to criticize a game that many see as a classic, but you know what? You don't get anywhere with lukewarm takes. Sometimes you gotta throw out some spice. Like, how about this? Video games are neat. Everyone should play them. And, you know, be inclusive, accept that everyone has a preference for how hard a game should be, what it should be about, what kind of characters are in it, what we should be doing in it, and just realize we're all in this together. We all have a shared appreciation for this amazing, expansive, and ever-evolving industry. Unless you like sports games, then you're a freak! You know, the story is great and all. I mean, there are parts of it that are unpleasant, of course. Some words I didn't need there. But I think the biggest thing that sustains my appreciation and fascination with this game is the way it looks. Its visual style, its aesthetic, its vibe, and frankly the danger to it. I'm more and more understanding my own interest in this era of adventure games, and I think a lot of it is that they were just the adventure game bad boys, rolling up in a '67 Chevy Impala, bumping some rock music, wearing a leather jacket, saving people, hunting things. The family biz. It's not the greatest melding of 3D animation and pixelated character models, but it's this endlessly charming middle ground for me. Cyber Dreams' penchant for Geiger-esque visuals continues in this one. Benny's level is covered in strange biomechanical plant life, and even when someone dies, they seem to be reduced to robotic scrap. Ellen's level is a strange mashup of cyberpunk and ancient Egypt. Ted is given this almost satirically typical adventure game setting, but it's the most self-aware. It's all a nostalgic joy to look at, though I feel odd referring to it as such because more and more I've come to realize that I just don't see visual age in a game through a very critical lens. If I felt a game looked nice a long time ago, I'm probably still going to think that. Having said that, there are a number of goofy visual bugs and half-assed animations. Like for some reason Benny kept getting stuck between two frames so it looked like he had a third arm growing out of his back. I mean, we already knew he had an extra limb, but this is crazy.
And they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, but basically there's two types.
They also use the same frame of him being dragged away for him being crucified, which just kind of looks funny. During Ellen's level, there's a room she won't go into because it's yellow, and because there's like a sphinx creature blocking a goblet she needs. So her solution is to blindfold herself so she doesn't have to see the yellow. But like the creature is still there. No, miss, it's still, oh. Okay. The MIDI soundtrack is pretty good. And it maintains this intense jazzy quality, yet always feeling oppressive and claustrophobic even. There's always a lot going on, a variety of instruments. Much like Am's personality, it feels unstable. When Night Dive re-released the game, it came with an enhanced soundtrack, derived from the original data tapes belonging to composer John Ottman. This included several tracks that didn't make it into the game, and all at a much higher quality than the soundtrack featured in the game. Though it wasn't properly integrated into the game, some have figured out a way to manipulate ScumVM to accept this objectively superior soundtrack. There is this part during Ellen's stage that has this great atmosphere built out of this deafening, ear-piercing tone that drowns out everybody's dialogue and makes your ears bleed.
This is the binary translator after all.
Clever girl. You're losing my tone.
Oh! No!
Voice acting is pretty great for all the main cast.
How quaint. A hope chest. I'll bet that maid is eternally hopeful. They all want their knight in shining armor.
Edna, you bitch. I know all about your plot to murder me.
I had to make a deal with Am. I had to.
Nimdoc being the only person whose voice I became sick of, not only for the bad accent, but just every line is like he's confused or terrified, which ordinarily I'd see as a common ground between us, but in this case it was just grating.
But why would Am bring me here to look for a lost tribe? Who could be lost in such a secure area? Why are you imprisoned here? You know me? Experiments? I know nothing of experiments. You are saying we were colleagues of some kind. I bother to have you imprisoned like this? Do you know of the lost tribe?
There are some side characters that don't quite measure up, like this kid that they clearly made pronounce his German accent phonetically.
No, not all the doctors. You and Dr. Mengele sent all the good doctors to the prison yard.
I should probably give him a break because it's just a kid, but I've seen kids that can act. okay? Most of them are constantly acting like they're not gang stalking me. From most of the critic reviews I've perused, the voice acting wasn't liked for a few reasons. One, they were wrong, and they're dummies, and they're big dumb idiot heads. Two, they say that Ellen's character is too jovial and wisecracking for how gravely intense her story is.
I'll designate you a new master sucker. Me! Nice chatting with you, Anubis, honey.
But not only is it in keeping with the tone of the game, her character was massively in denial. Like, I'm almost certain that was the point, that she was putting on this tough girl exterior because she was struggling to process something so horrific.
You ain't got no choice, Ellen girl. It's got to be the way.
The moment she is confronted with her rapist, like, it ain't funny. It's really sad and emotional, and the performance reflects that. The third thing is, funnily enough, the only voice actor billed in the credits is Harlan Ellison as Am, and it seemed to be a recurring theme that they would call his performance bad and over the top. PC Gamer wrote, I think the acting quality speaks for itself. Still, the passion is there, and that's what counts, right? GameSpot wrote, more disturbing is Ellison as the voice of Am, which may as well be renamed Ham after his overenthusiastic performance. Maybe it's like a had-to-be-there take. I don't know if seeing this come out as a new game in 1995 and paying full price had anything to do with that, but he's like the best fucking part of the game.
It was you humans who programmed me, who gave me birth, who sank me in this eternal straitjacket of substrata rock.
This dude's loving it. He's clearly having a blast embodying this reprehensible monster that he created. Voice acting at this time was unlikely to be all that realistic or film quality. Like, it was just fun, and I think it measures up to that. It's a goofy, charming performance by a dude that doesn't know what he's doing. That makes it all the more unpredictable. You don't know what he's gonna do. He might forget to credit the rest of the cast because that's just what Am would do. As a story, it may have very interesting points and is certainly the sort of thing to make people feel clever about themselves for getting it. But as a game, it's an abject failure. Illogical puzzles, search the pixel gameplay, utterly hilarious, unintentionally so, script almost bring this into the so bad it's good category. And there is certainly something making you want to see what's going to happen next, but not in a good way. At least you get the short story as part of the package. I'm not really certain what there is to get. The story's pretty straightforward sci-fi. This sounds more like a projection that you didn't follow the story, which is alarming because, again, it's not that complicated. A lot of old adventure games indulge in forcing players to pixel hunt to find items that are barely detectable with the human eye. This is not one of those. The game suffers from a lot of legitimate problems of the era, but not that one. Maybe I'm bad at deciphering tone, but I'm almost positive the game, at multiple points, is clearly trying to be funny, both in writing and programming. Like, there is undeniable silliness afoot in this game.
You're a worthless excuse for a man. Mama was right. You're not good enough for me.
The game is intentionally doing silly things. Like, I always feel a little crazy whenever I read shit like this about older games. The unintentionally funny or so bad it's good comments. I have to believe it's just a holdover from this game and others like Darkseid 2, Harvester, Phantasmagoria, Sanitarium even, consistently appearing in retrospectives and lists, touting them as disturbing or equal to things like Silent Hill and Resident Evil in terms of horror content. They're all adventure games at heart with a sense of humor and tons of whimsy to them. You think when they were writing this, they were thinking, oh man, when players see this spooky devil in a vest, they're gonna piss their pants. Maybe shit and cum. Played this first time when it came out, never finished it, but learned later on that due to several bugs, you could get stuck with no hope of getting forward. Unfortunately, none of these bugs have been fixed in this new release. You can still play as Nimdok and get stuck if you do wrong things in wrong order, and the game doesn't even hint that you should have done things differently. Much worse is the fact that you can actually complete all 5 tales, and then get stuck in the last episode without a hope to complete the game successfully. See, this is, in a way, a very valid criticism. I don't know if it's better or worse to tell you that those aren't bugs. They intended you to reach unwinnable states. That can be the only explanation because there are simply too many of them. It's not uncommon in these kind of games, but it is still frustrating, and it does require you to play at peak paranoia. Maybe even, God forbid, looking at a walkthrough. It's not ideal, and not very conducive in keeping you playing the game, especially if you're not already a fan of this kind of game. I have a feeling I'm going to wind up agreeing with a lot of these gamers, and that does not sit well with me. Skip hasn't aged well. I'll skip this review, since I don't listen to quitters. Please do us both a favor and read the short story instead. This game is an endless stream. What is that word? Nonsense puzzles, and you will most likely not get through it without a guide. Don't read the story instead. I'm sorry, it takes like 20 minutes and it's not that great. Use a guide if you want, but try to keep it as something you consult when you're stuck. If you follow it to the letter, you'll miss out on a lot of the experience, and honestly, there isn't much in the way of a great walkthrough out there. Most of them give you conflicting information leading towards different endings. Oh, no. No. The Seattle Mariners of video games, meaning it's really bad and gets too much hype from its fans. This sounds like sports bullshit. Get the fuck out of here, sportsman. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a tough game to recommend. It's only going to appeal to a certain audience, and even though there are new fans of adventure games, as indie developers have continued where games like this have left off, it still carries over the worst of the genre's missteps. It's the only thing preventing me from thinking of it as an essential adventure game, because everything else about it is working. Everything else is exceptionally good. It's just that this isn't how games work anymore. Unless you've already delved into actual 90s adventure games and accepted their questionable design choices, you're most likely going to be turned off by this game. And even I feel that. There's a lot here that I can enjoy, its atmosphere, its music, its fun dialogue. There is quality and care put into so much of it. Plus, I don't know, I like fucked up things because I'm all fucked up inside, I guess. I have this confused love for what it is, how unique it is, its story, and its occasionally misguided bravery. It calls to mind an era of computer games that means a lot to me, not only because it was the one I grew up with, but because it was full of so many of these out there, boundary-pushing experiments that often far overshot their intentions to make people understand that games could also be for adults. I find so much charm in 90s edgelordism. Like, that's just my fucking aesthetic. I Have No Mouth tries to impart this bleak meta experience, but does so by making choices that are all too often understandably assumed to be bugs, to be errors. The game is unpredictable, arguably broken and somewhat by design. Shit like unwinnable states and moon logic are not my favorite things about the genre, and there is enough of that here to genuinely bother me. Even the gameplay ideas that are inventive, like the morality system, just do not work, do not add anything, and only serve to muddle the game's logic. There are these brief glimpses where I'm actually getting into the gameplay. I feel like I'm playing a great classic, quality adventure game, and then I get to something that completely deflates that excitement. Oh, I didn't put the jar of eyeballs in a cardboard box. So now this guy smashes the jar, so I can't bring the golem to life, so I fucked myself. I can't end the game. I'm stuck here forever. Much like one of these characters, I'm just eternally stuck in this plane to wallow in my own ineptitude. Why would I think to put this jar in a box? It's in my inventory. The inventory's my box. Never has a game asked me to further conceal an item in such a way. Like what, he's not gonna check the box I'm holding? What difference does it make that the jar is in a box now? You know what, I'm letting the game get to me. I'm on the verge of a heated gamer moment, so I'm just gonna take a nap, something. Good night, Dean. Sleep well. Oh, hey, Sam. Didn't see you there. That's the end of my video for I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Thank you for watching it. I hope you're doing well. I hope you like the and comment and subscribe to I don't like asking you for things. Anyway, I appreciate you for watching my video. I appreciate you for supporting me. Here's a special thanks to those who have decided to help me out on Patreon. Special thanks to Ailing Uncle, Resurrection, Game Master, Bayard Brown, this deal is getting worse all the time. Nazim Kamal Ure, Mr. Benjamin, News Time, Karen Mavel, Dark Raptor 86, Oysto, Alexander Sundin, Octo, Alexander Smith, Joseph Zanoni, Nilanthrope, Dos Days, Turts, Canum, Castia Morgana, Brandon Kostuik, Ghosty, Charles Marr, Pizza Shift, Daphne Pittendridge, Jacob Sewers, Ridley the Savior, Andre Perkins, Necrophiliac, Stuka Bliat, Matt Bastard, Fart Mother, thank you for making me say that, Fabrice, Andrei Kalganov, Sergei Vorontsov, P. Dizzle, Simon Murray, Ophelia Fishwife, A Hanging Chad, Donut Stalker, Spooky, Mandalore Gaming, Astro Shepherd, David Harpstrite, Dan Cullen, Dazed Clockwork, Edward Crawford, Brendan McFadden, Lachlan Hare, Travis Houston, Hannes Jacoby, Big Honk, Jeremy Lott, Tyler Robinson, Honey Bibi, Startide, Robert Scotland, Nunu, Persian Air, Jake Desi, Commissar, Doxipine, Vlastan, Pekrosha, Arshes Knight, Spider, calling you Spider now, how about that? Ooey Ooey, Leland Miliokis, Simpin Goral, Alas Ratgunk, Atlantean Goldfish, Lucian Jelly, Sergey Vidovin, Rowdy Roddy Peeper, Major Millions, Tyler F., Mr. Boojangles, Evo Zap, Alec Galler, Strahinja Redenkovic, Dan Richardson, Fred Greisen, No Community, Otter Soldier, Flaccid Snake 69, Megan Carmody, DJ Necroman, Meme Queen, Jay Marshall, Joe Face, El Jaguar, Ruibi Somim, Sweet Pete in the Back Seat, Declan J. Keane, Totally Not a Mimic, Josh Sharf, Ottavio Albanesi, Bismarck, Michael King, Noiles, Keith James Jones, Roland, Petrus Montanou, Joyful Beard, Q-Chan, Jean-Philippe Malouin, Rose, Nicholas Nelson, Steinuel, Fazy, Vivitis, Ross Armstrong, Byron Callan, Callum May, Cassiar, Grimbeard and Neril are my two dads. If you got proof of that, I guess this concerns me a little bit. Rourke McKenzie, Austin Scott, Keith Pitt, Brianna Maria McKenzie, Lucas Kettner, Nikita Denisov, Mr. Sark, Givada, Dylan Sorum, Daniel Person, Brendan Naftel, Jojo Evans, Colton Rowe, PJ, League of Struggle, Charles Vincent Chevalier, Les Poussières de Verdun, Zuber Tuber, Sebastian Wappler, Sean Clausen, David Moreau, Sir Aloha Mora, Tomas Pelikan, Eris Alessandrakis, Pedro Costum, Adventure Game Geek, Ghost LPs, Niles Crane 19, Robert, Johan Cavand, Zaraka, Adrian Facci, Christopher White Schneider, Ricky Goss, Pixelfish, Wednesday V, Alex Hanna, Professor Nex, Lucas, Cassiel, Alex Blackwood, No Bunny, The Gaming Beehive, Little B, Drunk Taco, Matthias Waltman, Ricky Rigatoni, James Fitzwater, Robert McMahon, Hashi Singh, Jared, Viru, AJ Leroy, Brad, Terranfear, Anthony Daniel, Jonathan Becker, Sam C., Warhopper, Pebble, Kevin Thurber, Jeep Pete, The Super Pickle, Miles Smith, Dostia, Sura Prize, The Voyant Claire, Joe Lambo, Gargantua, Joe Reynolds, Ignacio de Guglielmi, Melon Man, Level 0, Sven Grell, Your Biggest Dad, Riza, OK Cat Dad, Tess Dunn. Gonna take a stab in the dark here. Yoni Niamela. You'll have to get back to me on that one. Homeboy Dirtbag, Crampig Newt, Tony Gleed, LaFazar, Bones Malones, Andrew McLaughlin, Eugene Balder, Duke Lordaeron, Zan, Eric Leong, Vukrules, Nagru, Daniel Newberry, Matchester, Sweeneasy, Fitzgerald 93, Bim Bizzle, Viet Doe, Pentagon Black, Dustsucker, Michael Sapka, Conrad Eastman, Oliver Marshall, Luke Gazway, Furin, Pagan Butler, Korn, Ikifu, Survival Horror 100, Brandon Schock, Sam Fuller, Cloister 56, Yossarian, Allegory, Big Bobo, Ian Kennedy, Lucas Mendel, Stray Dog Freedom, Similar Dude, Wendigo, A Fear Worth Living, Rasmus Karras, Aubrey, Devaeth Faust, Silvano Gonzalez, Ian, Huai Lee, Michael Beldy, Mr. Roboto, John Adams, Nathaniel Dolenchuk, Ian Baranek, Florian Vogel, Bertie Bertig, Rachel Rose, Vinculus, Avalanche Reviews, Negative Creep, Alex Theodorov, Alexis Pincinalt, Chris Barb, Sean Lovett, Chris Talarico, BMAC, Josh Hessler, Haimo Statman, Exalted Platypus, Boyi, Oriole, HL Longboy, Michael Moore, Manu Weidman, Danny D, Tony Brandt, Joshua Stewart, Curano, Chef Toker, QL2040, Gideon Joubert, Scott Motuz, ThisId4, Cabbage, Frand, Austin Mathis, Vey, Corey Ranson, Peachy Pixel 8, Sir Tristan, Tiana Lazik, Day Yang, Striders, Schluff, Sarah Denman, Stanislav, Casey Gould, Uradrag, Zachary Schulstad, Krylar, Ross Carmona, Khalifas, I Love OP, Leo Waddell, and Sammy3D for being a patron. Thank you so much for supporting me, for supporting my channel, supporting my existence, keeping me making videos, keeping me making days alive. I appreciate you a lot. You're amazing. Got a lot of stuff in the works. So we're all gonna get through this. I don't know about that. We're all gonna be okay. We're all gonna have content. Rest assured. I hope you're doing okay. I'm gonna let you go now. Here's the song.
I'm so dirty. I'm such a filthy man. I haven't showered, and I've got no plans. I wanna go down.